This video presentation on a PayPal scam trend is brought to you by Dan Manolescu, eCrime Consultant with eCrimeExpert.com. This presentation aims to provide awareness on this new scam using PayPal by looking at a specific scenario. A seller advertised his iPhone for sale on the Kijiji and Facebook marketplaces. As you can see here, the seller places his advertisement online detailing the product. This scam is dangerous because the initial response to the ad is very normal, polite, and there is no sign of it being a scam. As can be seen from the translation of the email, which was sent in French, it is a basic email indicating an interest in the product. The seller, seeing nothing suspicious about the first email, responds, confirming that the product is still available. The second email from the buyer is also very normal and includes regular inquiries. There is nothing suspicious here. For example, the buyer wants to know if the phone is damaged, scratched, and if the seller could send more pictures. Any normal potential buyer would ask these questions. Again, because there is nothing suspicious, the seller replies, answering the potential buyer's questions and provides more photos as requested. After receiving the seller's response, the potential buyer confirms that they want to purchase the product. He states that he wants the seller to ship the phone to a certain address because it's a gift for his girlfriend. This is not very unusual. He asks the seller what the price is for the device and the shipping costs together. What is unusual here is that he did not try to bargain the price at all, which most people try to do for privately sold goods. If you look more closely at the email, there is a key indicator that this is a scam. He asks to pay after receiving the merchandise, but the seller could miss this key warning sign as he suggests to use PayPal, which protects both the seller and the buyer because the paid money is kept by PayPal until there is a confirmation that the product has been received, which is the standard procedure. The seller agrees to use PayPal and to go to the post office and get the shipping quote in order to send the potential buyer the final price. The buyer sends a short email confirmation in order to stay connected and keep the transaction in progress. The seller sends the buyer the shipping costs and the final quote as promised. The buyer confirms the transaction and asks to be sent a payment request via PayPal in order to pay for the shipping and the product. The way this is done is that when someone has a PayPal account, they can send an electronic invoice to an email address, even if that person doesn't have a PayPal account. When the recipient receives the request, they can set up a PayPal account from where they can make the payment. The PayPal account is connected to the checking, savings, or credit card account. So in this case, the seller sent the request from his PayPal account to the buyer's address, and the status was pending as normal. Whenever doing online transactions, it's important to be as cautious as possible. It is safer to connect your PayPal account to a credit card rather than a savings or a checking account, because if someone takes money from your credit card, it is easier to recover, especially if you have insurance on your card. After sending the request, the seller receives the PayPal confirmation message. Many users can mistake this confirmation as the money being transferred, but in fact, this is just the confirmation message of the money request being sent to the buyer. But it does not confirm that the buyer made the payment and that PayPal is holding the money for you. This confirmation message appears to be legitimate as it has been sent from a PayPal email address, and the heading of the message was, "Dear Don Manolescu, the seller." The next message the seller received from PayPal is in French. This is something to carefully consider because the user's account is set up on PayPal Canada, and all the communication he has been receiving from them was in English, not French. But the communication with the buyer was in French. It's key to note that the email addresses the seller as "Dear email address," not "Dear Don Manolescu," as the illegitimate email from PayPal did. Why? Because the person who sent this message did not know the seller's name. If it was PayPal, they would have known his name and addressed him as such. The email requests that the seller provides the shipping confirmation before the payment is made, which is not normal practice. The email states that this is the new standard procedure. As mentioned earlier, the normal procedure is that payment is made by the buyer and PayPal holds the money until the seller sends out the product. Being cautious, the seller reread PayPal's new policies in place and standard procedures. He did not find any procedures similar to that outlined in his email. So he called PayPal in the US and asked for a confirmation of this transaction. When speaking to a PayPal representative, they confirmed that this transaction is not legitimate and that they do not have any records for it. They also confirmed that such new policies requesting the shipping to be made before the payment are not in place and that it is actually against their policies. After speaking to a PayPal representative, the seller went back to the last email that he received from the potential buyer. He noticed that they used a photo on their fake website with PayPal's logo to make their website look real. The potential buyer sent the seller another message pushing him to ship the item. They inserted a photo as seen here in their message in order to make it look more real. If you click this image, it will take you to PayPal's legitimate website. Here the potential buyer, or as now identified, the scammers, made a mistake. They became impatient. They sent the seller another message within 1 hour of the previous email. Again, they addressed the email as "Dear email address" instead of the seller's name as PayPal normally does. This time, the seller sent a message to the buyer telling them that he knew this was a scam. After that, they did not send any further messages. This is a new scam, and this buyer who was already using safe practices almost got scammed. Luckily, he checked out the PayPal's policies and called PayPal to inquire before proceeding with the shipping of the product. Criminals put a lot of time into their scams, making them look as real as possible, following the normal steps for such a transaction. They did not give up. They persisted in an attempt to make the seller ship the product without the buyer paying for it first. If you have any doubts about a transaction, even if it appears to be legitimate, always double check. Read, use your common sense, and ultimately double check with the service provider. Even if you have to pay for a long distance call, it's cheaper than not getting the value of your product and losing the product itself. You can also contact Dan at ecrimexpert.com for help and advice. Any questions about this presentation or about this PayPal scam can be submitted to Dan at ecrimexpert.com. Additional information can also be found at www.ecrimexpert.com. An informed user makes an informed decision.